Our next session is entitled How Travel Brands Can Drive Sophisticated Personalization with Best-in-Class Tech. And with us today, I have Florian from AWS and Ido from Braze joining us on our virtual stage. Gentlemen, hello.
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 Thanks so much for being here.
Pleasure.
You all have a lot of visibility into how the world's leading brands are driving the most advanced customer experiences, and everybody here wants to hear more from you. They're all as anxious as I am to have this conversation. So again, thanks so much for joining us. Ido, I'll start with you. Can you talk about your role at Braze and a little bit more about how Braze and Telium work together?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Lauren. And great to be here. Thanks for thinking about Braze. My name is Ido. In my current role, I lead Braze Global Technology and Cloud Partnerships team, where we help the world's leading brands, travel brands, to communicate with their customers and drive personalized messaging at scale. Prior to Braze, I led mobile growth at Kayak, the world's travel engine, as part of the Priceline Group. And at Braze, we see that roughly half of our travel customers use Braze across four digital messaging channels, including email, push notification, SMS, in-app messaging, and content cards. Braze is built on top of AWS, is architected on the modern basically architecture, stream processing, machine learning, and data agility capabilities. We partner closely with Telium, where Braze acts as the activation layer. So essentially, we're able to ingest in real-time data from Telium CDP and basically power those relevant messaging experiences.
Fantastic. I have a stack of the three of us here together, and this is a pretty cool stack in the real world as well. Florian, we at Telium also run on AWS. I'd love for you to kind of tell us a little bit about your role at AWS. Everyone knows, obviously, of Amazon Web Services, but talk about your world over there and the role that you play.
Sure. First of all, thanks so much for having us. It's really great to represent AWS and the partners I work with every day. And that literally describes my role. I'm the global partner lead for Amazon Web Services for all things travel and hospitality. So my background, I was born at an airport, never done something else than travel and technology in a way. Worked at Lufthansa, German Airline, Amadeus, Sabre, IBM, and as a travel manager too at Daimler Mobility. So I never really left the space. And then AWS was intending to build a partner segment for travel and hospitality. And I thought this is still today probably one of the most amazing jobs you can have. So it's really exciting. What I do here is literally in my professional life, I work with Lego blocks. We put them together, we provide them to partners, and that's the same I do with my 7-year-old son later. So it's really a great community that we build. And I think for especially what we've gone through the last 2 years, and I know we're going to talk about the industry's evolution. So many things have happened, but one thing I learned here at Amazon Web Services, it's always day one, right? And we're in the very early days of what's happening with the cloud. So great to be here and great to talk and share a little bit about the knowledge we learned from our customers.
Fantastic. Thank you both so much. Okay, Florian, let's stick with you. Let's go back in time a little bit and just kind of talk about the last couple of years from your seat on the big stage, looking at the travel and hospitality industries. What are your observations? What have you watched happen?
Yeah, so talking about watching, these 2 years ago, I had rimmed glasses, and it didn't change really a lot. But when I look through those glasses and I look through the experience, if we look at what's taking place in our industry over the last, let's say, 12 to 18 months, 24 months, what we see, what we learn from our customers, travel and hospitality brands have moved boldly into digital transformation. And travel hospitality companies, being myself in that industry for now over 2 decades, we're so used to personalized experiences in person, right? So everyone had to pivot and face what I saw as like three emerging trends. First, what I call a new bar of personalized online commerce. And I like to call it the mental model of markets of one. So the hyper personalization to take all the data and bring it into and make every customer feel in the moment that you're only there for them, right? And secondly, the rise of contactless convenience. It became this ambiguity between touchless first as a health and risk issue, and then it became the rise of contactless convenience, which was really born out of a necessity, and now we can't live without it. And thirdly, it's as I always like to expand the lens, not just to the end customer, but the customer is also staff, a very important customer, and sophisticated staff automation to help merge, especially in our travel and hospitality world, the digital and physical world. That was another element. And what we've seen is we observed that customers went through two phases. First, it was all about being resilient and taking those things as they just came like a wave, keep operations afloat. And then in the moment of crisis, we really saw a lot of companies here innovating through disruption. And that's which brings us from the past into today. To sum it up, I know I said that already, and I continue to say it. Customers had to do more with less and faster.
What would you add to that, Ido? I see you nodding along over there. What else have you observed from your vantage point?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, if you traveled yourself during the past 2 years, you know that there was a lot of friction to travel during this time, right? During the pandemic, the experience has become much more complex, right? They had varied government regulations, border opens, then borders are closed, requirements for testing, quarantine, documentation. There were a lot of changes in the way that we all travel and in the way that we all dine. If you think about food delivery platforms as well, in terms of different procedures such as contactless that they basically had to launch during the pandemic. So all in all, many changes that those brands has to deal from an operational perspective. At Braze, we saw that travel and hospitality brands and our customers such as Agoda, Bird, Clear, Deliveroo, Skyscanner, Trainline, Yelp, and many, many others, they delivered more than 87 billion messages in 6 months alone during the peak of the pandemic from August 2020 till January 21st. But what we saw is because all of those changes, customers that really had a modern technology stack that is architected on principles such as speed, scale, agility, and use principles like data streaming, this stack really allowed them to deal with those changes and adapt quickly to those changes. And speed really played a key role during this time. And one example that I can think about is Deliveroo, which is a QSR brand and a food delivery brand based in the UK that is a Braze customer that was able to scale up messaging almost in real time through multiple channels during the pandemic to notify customers about the changes based on government regulations, right? So for example, they had to let customers know that restaurants are open and then restaurants are closed, and also about the new procedure in terms of contactless, for example, that food can really be delivered during this time. And I think that, the Braze platform really allowed them to send that messaging and let their customers know about the changes and provide those connected experiences. So that's an example of a customer that was able to quickly adapt the multi-channel messaging strategy and personalize the experience based on what was actually going on based on government regulations.
What a time to work in travel and hospitality, right? The pandemic, data signal loss, privacy regulations. But there's hope for all of us here. Travel is not only inherent to scaling and continuing to build our business, but it's also just a core human passion, right? That people just have to get out. That wanderlust is just exploding, right, on the personal side. So where does that leave us now, Ido? You both did just a fantastic job of kind of summarizing what you've been watching over the last couple of years. What are you seeing your partners that you're working with today, your customers, focusing on today to get ready for what's next in the future?
Yeah, I think we spoke about personalization as a way to basically provide connected experiences, right? Relevant experiences based on operational changes. But there's a lot of ways that brands are thinking about personalization these days. And I think, when we think about customer engagement, it's probably the biggest challenge as well as opportunity for Braze to really get this right. I think the technology also in the past few years had advanced so much that now we can think about predictive models. We can think about AI and machine learning as well. From a marketing standpoint, marketers have more insights than ever into customers' behaviors. So how to be smart about this data and how to make sure that they're able not only to collect the right data, but to send the right message at the right time so that basically experience would feel very, very, very personalized. We see that 46% of CIOs, for example, see customer engagement as a new era for expansion. So it's not only from a marketing standpoint, other stakeholders within the organization also recognize personalization as a key revenue driver for their business. And I think that we think about the opportunity today, it's really about driving that one-to-one personalization, right? We've talked about, customer segments, but the ability today is to understand that individual user that have their own preferences, right? Each user is their own individual user at the end of the day. And the technology today really allows us to understand that user and send that basically right message. And I think personalization, when we think about in the context of travel, really helps us to remove friction out of the experience and again, provided connected experiences. So, Skyscanner is a good example of Braze customer that was able to basically work with us and drive more personalization. They're a global leading OTA. They have an international travel user base with 100 million people over 30 languages. And they were successfully able to leverage consumer data into creating the right deals and offer them to the customers. During the pandemic, Skyscanner had two main questions that their customers were really battling with. The first one is, can I go to the destination I want to go? And the second question is, should I go given everything that is going on? And what they've done with us, they created this interactive map to illustrate this information, and they linked it to their data infrastructure. They used Braze Canvas, which is our customer journey management feature, and they send daily email to users that let them know about changes according to the map that they've built that was relevant to their travel interest. They include border restriction, flight and hotels offer, and they also used other channels to basically constantly send information and update this in real time to let user know. And essentially the feedback on this feature from both customers was very, very positive.
It's a great use case. That sounds incredible. And I can certainly relate to that, right? Like everything changes. You want to go somewhere. Can you get there? But then when you get there, can you have any fun or can you get around? So that's great value for sure to deliver to their customer base. Florian, what about you? What conversations are you having with your partners out in the world today? What are they focused on, and how is AWS helping them with that?
So when we look at what's happening today into the future, I think what we learn is that customers have entered what I call like a virtuous circle of digital personalization. And let me back that up with some data. I read a recent McKinsey study, and they've shown how the travel industry had one of the highest growths of digital adoption by 46%. And in the last 6 months overall of last year, the adoption has plateaued because many things like streaming services and others, they have benefited from like the at-home situation. And now you're there as a travel brand. You got that booster on literally on digital adoption. And as it stays mostly well above pre-pandemic levels, companies, what we learn now is they look to improve and stay competitive, leveraging that digital personalization flywheel. So the more travelers are used to those channels, organizations learn from behavioral data. So what was like a necessity, now you go back and say, now we can learn a lot. You start to introduce sentiment analysis, like what partners do is like they look at, okay, the burger was good and the fries were cold, right? How do you separate this sentiment and make it a reasonable interaction in the moment so that someone like Telium can pick up the data and someone like Braze can send a message and say, I see you were not happy with the fries, but the burger was good, right? So that's just a simple example of something that happens at scale. As you said, 80 or more billion of transactions. As we speak, so many things are happening. So as organizations learn, they in turn draw higher adoption as they improve those experiences. And that's really what's stimulating. So what was, let's say, stimulating demand is now turning into a new level of loyalty at the end, because it was a very thin line. And the three things that we learned that partners are helping customers with first is better data quality. There's still a lot to do. We in our industry, we say we're rich in data but poor in insights, right? The first question is always, how can you help me break down that data silos and put it all together? Secondly, more automation to not replace the human, but to replace potential human error, right? To let customer agents work on what's important, but not work on what we could automate. And there's so much technology with and approachable and consumable services that we have in the space of machine learning, that it's been very easy now to consume it and build on top. And thirdly, it's really to just further leverage the cloud to experiment cheaper and faster. That was something that wasn't possible. So you can spin up a new check-in procedure within minutes, go global, test it. If it doesn't work, you bring it back, right? And that's something where you don't need a server for to host and wait 3 weeks to do it. So these are the things that are moving us from today, of course, into the future. And to close on, we are privileged to work with so many customers and partners. So we try to give that back, and we do a lot of publishing. So when you go on our website, you find I think now close to 100 case studies. You can dive into reference architectures. We wrote a book with partners, including Telium and Braze and many others, about what's next for travel and hospitality. And we think we really like to create that guidance for the industry, as there's so much to dive deeper. And at the end, you can always contact us.
Love that. We love being in books, especially in the company of you wonderful partners, but we have to agree that this is a pretty solid partnership here. Ido, Florian was just touching a bit on ML and thinking about the future. AI and ML are always hot topics. We know that there's a lot still to be explored there. Also, just kind of thinking about what's next. What are those use cases that customers are really excited about? We're seeing a ton of growth and interest right now across our customer base in activating more of the social network connectors. Where are you seeing folks have success with, social network connectors, AI, ML? How do you kind of have the crawl, walk, run approach to scaling up in those areas?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start with saying that if we kind of look cross industries, then we definitely see D2C brands within each industry, and it's true also for travel, that we're really able to capitalize on those trends, right? But not everyone are exactly in the same place, right? So I would expect to see more subsegments of the travel industry that looked at those D2C brands and really want to capitalize on the success that these D2C brands saw with personalization, AI and machine learning, team structure sometimes when you think about, right? Like center of excellence, data science team, and really understanding, what we can do with first party data. How can we improve loyalty? How can we improve engagement? Can we unleash the potential of multi-channel, right? Data agility. And essentially, this will help them to better target users and maybe individual users versus segments sometimes, to really tailor the experience for that specific user. I also think that the concepts, right, that we've talked about at the beginning of agility, scale, speed, and also creative experimentation are concepts that will help to prepare for tomorrow's future, right? When it comes to customer engagement, brands should be able to not only adopt, but also innovate. So they will be brands that will have that right infrastructure will be able to push that envelope even further, and essentially understand what would be the next communication channels that consumer will want to engage with brands. There's a lot of conversations about voice as a potential channel as well, with conversational interfaces. How can that blend into a multi-channel strategy of a brand in the future? So those are the few things that we are thinking about at Braze.
Very cool. Okay, we are starting to get quite a few questions into the chat, and we've got a few minutes left. I'm not sure which of you is my blockchain expert, but let me read off the question and you all can fight over who's going to take it first. How do you think blockchain will impact CDP, self-sovereign identity, and the travel and hospitality sector more generally?
I can give it a stab and then go to my CDP brother and expert, Ido, because blockchain is something that we have been working on a lot, right? At AWS, providing services, making that available. And what we see across the industry is mostly the use cases that relate to stability and security. They rank very high. It's the decentralized nature, right, of the information, specifically transactions that are core to our industry, that they cannot get lost. And if you pass information, which we do all the time in travel and hospitality, blockchain can really help you to do that now with a credential and not making sure it gets lost, and do that at high scale. And some of the use cases that are maybe not 100% related to CDP, because we look at a broader industry spectrum, tracking luggage, right? Identification services, traceable payments, and then more related to CDP, customer loyalty schemes. So definitely a hot topic. We got a couple of partners working on that specifically, but I'm happy to Ido to chip in more detail on the CDP side of things.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. I think just with respect to time, I see we have an additional question, so maybe I can offer answer to this question as well, just to make sure we cover it all.
Thank you.
What can brands overseas? What can U.S. brands learn from brands overseas? Right, brands that are based in Europe, in Asia. I think when you think about creative experimentation, in a way, Europe is fragmented into different markets that speak different languages, right? And you can think about APAC in the same way. So those regions were kind of forced to think about creative experimentation, right? Because they had to basically service different customers within different regions that speak different languages. And I think that, there's a lot of know-how in terms of how do they do it, right? How do they scale this creative automations, and how do they create personalization that is based on content? So I think, there's an opportunity to share some of the knowledge to other use cases, potentially not languages, with, American brands.
Absolutely. And, when I think about travel and hospitality and really all the different industries that most of us have purview into, it's always interesting to see what's happening internationally and, what overseas may make its way here to the States. Florian, what would you add to that? What trends do you see happening for travel and hospitality specifically, whether it be in Asia or in Europe, that folks on the call here in our industry in the Americas should be paying attention to or preparing for?
Yeah, it's a great question. I relate it back to the global nature of our industry, and it's that it is a wonderful, I call it wonderful complex patchwork of multiple industries. So you can start learning by how does retail emerge in Asia Pacific? Like how do you work and use customer data to drive growth? I think we see some great examples in that region of how retail is blending digital and in-person interactions with platforms that are not the norm here, that maybe are not used here, right? When you look there, so that's a great segue to learn. Also from mobility, I heard you talking to the great leader, the lady from Uber, right? And if you just think about how mobility is served, it's like the first thing you need to do, right? You get out of the house and you see how you get to the airport, how you get to the plane. And so that's another area where we can learn a lot. In Europe, we have rail networks where actually there are passengers and no cattle or coal. We got less of that here. Yeah. So we can learn a lot from intermodal transportation. So these are just two examples. The high bar that we learn in the APAC region about how they work with retail, the transportation industry that is so condensed, much more and interesting in Europe. And so there are endless examples. I think it's just good to be curious, to look in there. The one thing is, we don't have to forget travel and hospitality is a perishable good. Everything we do exists only once, right? The airline seat, the hotel room. So we always have to be at the best of our game, and that's maybe applicable around the world.
I love that. Okay, we have a couple more minutes, so I want to give each of you 1 minute. We have a lot of folks here. Maybe they already have a CDP, maybe they're thinking about implementing a CDP, all in the travel and hospitality industry. From what you know today now, if someone is considering a CDP, kind of what advice would you give them? Or if, all of us who have a CDP are looking to really up our game when it comes to personalized experiences, what advice would you give? So Ido, I'll start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, again, when we think about some of the principles that we've talked about today, such as data agility, so really understand how that CDP works with the entire ecosystem of partners that you want to work with. And obviously, Braze and Tilium have native integrations that serve as, our mutual customer base. Tilium is architected on top of AWS. So essentially, it's critical for your CDP to work really well with, the stack that you are already using or thinking about. So, it's an integrated stack, and the data flow and the data capabilities to move those data sets and those audiences between the platform is critical. You probably want to think about MarTech strategy. You probably want to think about CDP that also address and help you on your advertising strategy as well, right? If you're thinking from a CMO, from a marketing perspective as well. And obviously, how that CDP deals with data regulations, data privacy, and make sure that, you feel comfortable with kind of like their talk track about that, because obviously that's a very important topic as well.
Perfect. Okay, Florian, what would you say?
I can't compliment more than Ido says on CDP. So let me provide an AWS across the board help when we talk to customers that do exactly that, implementing CDPs and customer engagement. There's a couple of things. One, what we observe is the customers driving the narrative, how quickly you move. So we encourage everyone to build in time to value as your KPI if you work with partners and you work with us, you work with a cloud provider. Secondly, foundation of all things personalization is data, right? So we say every transaction, every drop counts, as every transaction becomes both a data point and a connection to your customer. So what we're seeing is customers move from data everywhere to intelligence everywhere. And as we're at this intersection where CDPs are not the CDPs of the past, not CRM platforms, but AI, ML induced intelligence data platforms, it is much easier to implement and experiment. And the third thing is really watch out. There's a big shortage of talent. We alone want to train 29 million people by 2025. That's the good news, is that's why we have partners, right? So reach out. We continue to build the largest community of partners, as there is a huge shortage in talent where we have to work on. And lastly, if you adopt the first cloud first leadership, if you dive into CDP for the first time, if you want to do this, the move to the cloud is not technical. It's really about people and culture. So when you do that, don't forget, if you come with that shiny technology piece, if we do everything right, bring the people on the trail, there's no need to boil the ocean. Experiment fast and start with a customer and employee obsessed engagement. So
excellent advice from both of you. Thank you so much. I have really enjoyed this conversation. We really appreciate your partnerships both at AWS and at Braze. Definitely a really powerful stack right here represented. And I know our audience learned a ton. So thank you both, gentlemen, for your time today.
thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Lauren.